Hello everybody, hope you are doing good. So, today we will cover ascending tracts. As in the previous class, I have discussed a bit about ascending tracts like the general features. So, today's class will be exclusive on the ascending tracts. We will start from the scratch. So, first of all, ascending tracts means these are the tracts which carry the sensory information. So, this is the sensory system. So, we can either call them sensory system or the ascending tract. So, ascending tracts, they have been divided into three types depending on where exactly they are ending. Like say they are carrying the information, the sensory information from the body, each and every part of the body, and it is carried via the neurons that starts from the spinal cord and end in the, either they end in the cerebral cortex or they end in the brain stem or they end in the cerebellum. Major chunk ends in the cerebral cortex. So, based on where they are terminating, these ascending tracts have been subdivided into three types. The first one is ascending tract connecting the spinal cord with cerebral cortex. Second one is ascending tracts ending in brain stem, and the third one is ascending tracts ending in the cerebellum or spinocerebellar pathway. Major chunk, as I said, is via these tracts which end in the cerebral cortex. So, this is the important topic for today's class. Ascending tracts which ends in the cerebral cortex. So, for better understanding, they have been further subdivided into two parts. One is the posterior column, second one is anterolateral column. And this posterior column and anterolateral column is based on the position of the tract within the spinal cord, whether they are present in the posterior aspect or in anterolateral aspect of the spinal cord. And mind you, when we say the posterior column or the dorsal column or anterolateral, it means these tracts are present within the white matter, either the dorsal aspect or the anterolateral aspect of the spinal cord in the white matter. And what was the white matter? White matter was the exterior part of the spinal cord. If you can recall back, the innermost part, butterfly shape, was the gray matter, and the surrounding, the entire surrounding was the white matter. And what was the white matter? Like we discussed in the previous class, white matter is the axons, whether the myelinated or unmyelinated axon fibers. So, these tracts are present in the white matter when they carry the information. So, the second one is in the brainstem, third one is in the cerebellum. So, we will cover these two, brainstem and cerebellum, afterwards. First, we will start with these two. So, starting with the first one, this diagram there is no need to go into detail. Okay. The first one is posterior column, and posterior column is what? The one which is present in the dorsal aspect. So, dorsal column medial lemniscus system, and the second one is anterolateral system or spinothalamic, they have been called. So, whether the dorsal column or the anterolateral, generally we can say this is a 3 neuron system. There will always be 3 neurons which will carry the sensory information from the peripheral sensory receptor to the conscious level of the cerebral cortex. And in both the systems, the first sensory neuron that innervates a sensory receptor, the first sensory neuron that innervates a sensory receptor has cell body in the dorsal root ganglia, DRG. So, cell body is present in the dorsal root ganglia of the spinal nerve. And if we draw the diagram, say this is the dorsal root ganglia cell body, okay, and it has got two branches. This is the peripheral one which is going to receptor, and this is the central one which goes into the spinal cord. Okay. So, this is primary neuron, whether we are talking about the dorsal column or anterolateral column. Okay. anterolateral column. The second neuron is, or the secondary neuron is the one which will decussate, and by the meaning of decussate is they will cross over. Okay, they will cross over. So, the first neuron or the primary neuron synapses with the second neuron, and that is the part, this second neuron is originating either in the spinal cord or the brain stem that divides these two systems, that we will cover in the coming slide. So, the second order neuron, just remember for the time being, the second order neuron is the one which will cross over to the opposite side, which will crosses the midline. Like say, if we, the first order neuron, the primary neuron was carrying the sensation from the left side of the body, it will end, secondary order neuron will start and will cross over to the right side of the body, okay, right side of the spinal cord, because the primary neuron which is carrying the information from the left side of the body will enter in the spinal cord through the left side, okay, and the second order neuron will cross over to the right side of the spinal cord, and then it will be carried along the right side of the spinal cord throughout and enter in the brainstem, okay, depending on like the whether the second order neuron is starting from the brainstem or spinal cord. It crosses over, that is the main important thing to remember, the second order neuron will cross over to the opposite side. And third order neuron, second order neuron will cross over to the opposite side and always end in the thalamus. And which part of the thalamus? Thalamus has got so many multiple nuclei that we will talk about when we will discuss the thalamus, but for the time being remember we are concerned about ventral posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. So, the second order neuron will always end in the ventral posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus, and from there will be the origin of the third order neuron of this ascending tract, and that third order neuron will end or terminate in the cerebral cortex. Where exactly in the cerebral cortex? In the post central gyrus, because the post central gyrus or Brodmann area 312 is called as somatosensory cortex, and there is topographic representation of the body part in that area. So, depending on the origin of the tract, the primary order neuron, whether it is coming from the upper limb or the lower limb or the face or the trunk, accordingly it will end in the topographic representation of the somatosensory system correspondingly, whether it is for the lower limb. So, it will end in the part of the cerebral cortex which is representing the lower limb. Okay. Likewise, that is the common or commonality between dorsal column and anterolateral column, means it is 3 neuron system. Now, what are the functions? Anterolateral system, remember it carries pain and temperature sensation. Broadly, just remember pain and temperature, and one more you can add, crude touch. See, the touch is, it is divided into two types. One is the fine touch, very fine touch, like if we are touching a particular person with the help of the cotton fiber, the whisk of cotton fiber, okay, that is the fine touch. And if we are touching crudely, just putting a palm, okay, or there or with any other rough object, that is the crude touch. So, pain, temperature and crude touch, 3 sensations, they are carried by anterolateral system, and the rest of them like the discriminative touch. Discriminative touch means 2-point discrimination, like you are putting 2 pointed structures on the body and you will be able to appreciate they are the 2 different points, okay, that is a 2-point discrimination touch. Or conscious proprioception. What is proprioception? Proprioception is awareness of the body, okay, awareness of the body position, like if you are standing or sitting posture, like say to know about the position of your different body parts, okay. The best example is, सरल भाषा में अगर बताया जाए तो जस्ट लाइक से आप एक काम कीजिए, आंखें बंद कीजिए, क्लोज योर आइज एंड ask one of your family member, brother, sister or parents, any one of them, ask them to hold your big toe. You just sit or lie down quietly, close your eyes and ask the family member to hold your big toe with the help of index finger and thumb. और कहीं टच नहीं करना है, without touching any part of the body, just ask them to hold the big toe with the help of index finger and thumb. And now ask them, उन्हें बोलिए कि आप अपनी मर्जी से उस अंगूठे को ऊपर या नीचे कीजिए, जहाँ भी आपका मन करे वहाँ कीजिए, और फिर मेरे से पूछिए कि अंगूठा ऊपर है या नीचे है, और आपको आंखें बंद करनी है. आप करके देखिए, आपको पता चल जाएगा कि अंगूठा आपका नीचे है, ऊपर की तरफ है या बीच में पोजीशन है, विदाउट इवन लुकिंग एट दैट बिग टो. It means you are aware about the position of your big toe without even looking at it. That is the proprioception. Okay. So, the conscious proprioception, vibration and the pressure, all these sensations are carried via the dorsal column. So, first we will start with dorsal column, then we will cover the anterolateral system. And what is the general sensory? Like we covered, there are 3 neuron systems. So, diagrammatically we can say the first order is this one. The dorsal root ganglia is there, which has got, this is dorsal root ganglia neuron is pseudo unipolar. Why we call it pseudo unipolar? It appears that this body is giving only one branch, but that one branch is bifurcating after some time. So, appears as unipolar, but there is not unipolar, it is bipolar, that is why it is pseudo unipolar. So, the peripheral branch is going to the receptor and the central branch is going to the spinal cord, and where it ends, it can end in the spinal cord or the brain stem, depending on whether this is the dorsal column or anterolateral, that we will cover, like which system ends in spinal cord and which system primary neuron ends in brain stem. So, after that the second order neuron, the neuron number 2 cell body is ipsilateral to the neuron 1. So, it will always be on the same side, like say if we are talking about the sensation on the left side, any type of the sensation. So, the second order neuron or the neuron number 2 in the tract will always be from the left side, and if we are talking about the sensation on the right side, then the second order neuron will always be on the right side. Origination will be on the same side, ipsilateral, then it will cross over. So, the second order neuron always crosses the midline, crosses in the tract or lemniscus, and then it will always end in the thalamus. Thalamus we can call it as gateway of the cerebral cortex. Like these tracts, ascending tracts, they have to travel through the thalamus, and from the thalamus there will be the origin of the third order neuron, and it will end in the post central gyrus, and that is present in the parietal lobe, Brodmann area number 3, 1 and 2. Okay, that is the general aspect of the sensory pathway. So, now let us start with the posterior column. Posterior column means posterior or dorsal, one and same thing, and medial lemniscus. There are few terms, one is the medial lemniscus, then the second term is fasciculus gracilis or fasciculus cuneatus, and then there is nucleus gracilis or nucleus cuneatus. So, first we will call the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. Fasciculus is nothing but we can just track, just remember the other name of the track or the collection of the nerve fibers. See, there are millions and millions of the neurons which will carry the sensation from individual different part of the body, and those neurons will collectively ascend up through the spinal cord and the brain stem. Okay. So, they are collectively called as, they are collectively traveling through the through a certain part, that is called as the fasciculus. Now, the fasciculus gracilis and cuneatus, this is based on, say if I try to draw the diagram, say this one, see this is spinal cord. Okay, just remember this is the spinal cord and this is the midline, and if I try to say this is the lower part, this is the lower part and this is the upper part. So, the tracts which are coming, we are talking about the dorsal column here, okay, and dorsal column pathway that enters, it will enter and move along. on the same side of the spinal cord. Then this is the lowermost, distalmost, lowermost, then more proximal to it will again occupy this one, this one. Okay, it will go like this, and this was the upper part. Just imagine we are talking about the cervical, and if I try to represent it with different color, say orange, then they will move like this way. Okay. So, the blue one, these tracts, they are collectively forming this, say this is one fasciculus, this is another fasciculus. The blue fasciculus is called as fasciculus gracialis, FG, and the orange one, the orange fasciculus is called as fasciculus cuneatus, C. C for cuneatus. Just remember the upper one, the upper fibers, upper means from the upper part of the body, and upper part of the body, if we look at, like, say, what is the upper part of the spinal cord? Cervical one. So, the upper part of the body tracts, or we can say the upper limb and upper part of the thorax, they form C for cervical, C for cuneatus, fasciculus cuneatus. And from the lower part of the body, or we can say the lower limb or lower part of the trunk, lower trunk, say below T5, they will form fasciculus gracialis. That is the one feature. The second feature, if you have observed, while when I say these tracts, when I try to draw the diagram, see, this is the peripheral most, and just imagine this one was upper one, the most proximal one. What is the significant feature? It's like the peripheral one is occupying the most medial most position. Okay, medial most position. I will try to draw the same thing again. Say this was the spinal cord. Okay, and just imagine this is the midline. Okay, midline, and if we say this is the peripheral most neuron, it will come and travel along the midline, the medial most position. The second one will be lateral to this, the third one will be lateral to the both, fourth one will be more lateral. Similarly, see the lower one is occupying the medial most position. It's like, just imagine कि आपको सामान पैक करना है एक ट्रक में, तो आप क्या करोगे? सबसे पहले जो पहला बॉक्स होगा वो आप बिल्कुल अंदर की तरफ करोगे ना. So, the same system happens over here. The one which is coming from the lowermost part of the body is occupying the medialmost position. Okay, the medialmost position in the spinal cord, and the one which is proximal is occupying the lateral one, or we can say they are falling in line. Random कुछ नहीं है यहाँ पर, सब कुछ they are following the order. Okay. So, fasciculus gracialis we covered, fasciculus cuneatus now we know. Now, we can say the fasciculus gracialis is the medial to the fasciculus cuneatus. Why? Because the fasciculus gracialis is the one which is coming from the lower part of the body, and lower part of the body were occupying the medial most position. That is why it is written the fasciculus gracialis is medial to fasciculus cuneatus, and all these fasciculus, whether the gracialis or cuneatus, they are formed by the axon of the first order sensory neuron, which is located in dorsal root ganglia. Okay. So, fiber derived from the lowest ganglia are the most medial, and highest ganglia are most lateral. After entering the spinal cord, fibers ascend through the posterior white funiculus and reach the medulla. So, these, the primary order neuron, the first order neuron, they are, just imagine how long they are. The one which is starting from the lower part of the body, or we can say which is carrying the sensation from the foot, okay, that will enter in the spinal cord, in the lumbosacral region, in the sacral region, and that will travel along on the same side throughout up to the medulla. Just imagine how long it is. Okay, that is the first order neuron. They will ascend through the posterior white funiculus and reach the medulla, and where exactly they will end in the medulla respectively, whether they are coming from the fasciculus gracialis or fasciculus cuneatus. That area is called as nucleus gracialis and nucleus cuneatus respectively. They terminate in the medulla by synapsing with the neuron, means the nucleus gracilis, the fasciculus gracilis is terminating at the nucleus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus is terminating at the nucleus. Fasciculus cuneatus will be terminating at the nucleus cuneatus respectively. Okay. So, see in this diagram, first of all they are carrying the sensation of dorsal column pathway are carrying the sensation of which type of sensation? 2-point discrimination or discriminative touch, proprioception, vibration, position, and one more thing, that is the stereognosis. All these terminology we have covered previously in our central nervous system starting classes. What is stereognosis? Stereognosis is कि अभी आपने जैसे मान लो कोई भी चीज़ आपने आंख बंद कर रखी है, कोई भी चीज़ आपके हाथ में पकड़ा दी जाए और इफ़ यू आर फेमिलियर विद दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग विदाउट लुकिंग एट इट यू विल नो व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इट इज़. जैसे आपने पेन उठाया है, कोई भी पेन है, तो आप जस्ट उसकी शेप को फील करके आप बता दोगे कि दिस इज़ पेन और दिस इज पेंसिल और दिस इज बॉटल और दिस इज मोबाइल फोन. So that thing is called as stereognosis. So all these sensations are carried by dorsal column pathway tract. Okay. So in this diagram, this is the first order neuron. It is arranged in the dorsal column, in the spinal cord it moves and it was subdivided into fasciculus cuneatus and gracilis. Gracilis was for the lower, below the T6 level and they are the medial most, and fasciculus cuneatus was for the upper limb above the T5 segment and they are occupying the lateral most position, right, the lateral most position. So, they will travel along the spinal cord and end in the respective area of the medulla. Fasciculus gracilis will end in nucleus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus will end in nucleus cuneatus. And nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus term is, nucleus means they are the derivative of cell body of the second order neuron, and what we discussed in starting initial of the class, the second order neuron will always be on the same side. So, this is on the same side because we are talking about the left side and second order neuron is originating on the left aspect of the medulla. And the second thing about the second order neuron, second order neuron has got two specific property. One property is they will always originate ipsilaterally. So, they are originating ipsilaterally. Second property was the second order neuron will cross over to the opposite side, midline crossover or decussation. See, it is crossing over to the opposite side, and after crossing over in the opposite side, again these fiber, the tracts, they will form a tract that is called as medial lemniscus. So, medial lemniscus is the tract or the fiber which travels along the brain stem, the upper part of the medulla. These nucleus gracilis and cuneatus, they are present in the lower part of the medulla oblongata. So, remaining the upper part of the medulla, midbrain and pons, all these areas along which it carries, these tracts travel up to the thalamus, they are forming the medial lemniscus, okay, medial lemniscus, and then they will end in the ventral posterior lateral nucleus of the thalamus. From there, there will be the origin of the third order neuron and will travel along the same side and end in the post central gyrus. So, what we can interfere this one we can see in this diagram is, receptor is, this is the left side of the body and this is the right side. Receptor which are originating in the left side, ultimately they are ending on the right side of the cerebral cortex. So, right side of the cerebral cortex or the postcentral gyrus is the one which receives the sensation from the left aspect of the body. Okay. So, these fasciculus gracilis, these are just theoretical part, like they are also called as tract of Gall, and fasciculus cuneatus are called as tracts of Burdak, and fasciculus gracilis lies medially, cuneatus lies laterally, that we have covered. So, if we look at go into detail, the same thing what we have covered is written in these slides. So, the second order neurons are originating from nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus and they crosses the midline, and their axon they have been given the name internal arcuate fiber. So, these internal arcuate fiber are nothing but the second order neuron which will cross over to the opposite side, and after crossing over of the two sides they will constitute the sensory decussation. What is sensory decussation? Like say if we draw the diagram of the sensory decussation, say this is the medulla, we are showing the medulla. So, the second order neuron which originate on of this is the right side and this is the left side. So, these second order neuron which are originating in the right side, they will cross over to the left, and the one which are originating from the left, they will cross over to the right. So, this crossing over is called as decussation. So, this crossing over or this decussation is called as sensory decussation, and then they are called as medial lemniscus pathway. Medial lemniscus pathway. Okay. And these medial lemniscus fibers, they will terminate in ventral posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. That is the second order neuron. What was the third order neuron? They originate in VPL, ventral posterolateral nucleus of the thalamus, and they will end in the somatosensory area of the cerebral cortex, that is the parietal lobe, postcentral gyrus. And these tracts, the third order neuron, they form they pass through the internal capsule and corona radiata. Corona radiata, the literal meaning of corona radiata is like these are the fibers like in this way spread out. Okay. That is the part of the internal capsule. Okay. So, that is the third order neuron. Diagrammatically in detail, it has been shown over here like say this part is say the lower part of the spinal cord, and this one is cervical spinal cord, this one is lumbar spinal cord. So, the lumbar spinal cord is forming the fasciculus sorry, the fasciculus gracialis. See, this is the medial most position, and the fiber which are coming from the cervical spinal cord, they are on the lateral aspect, the fasciculus cuneatus, right, fasciculus cuneatus. Then within the lower medulla, the origin of the second order neuron from the corresponding cuneate nucleus and gracile nucleus, they will cross over to the opposite side, and then it forms the medial lemniscus. Medial lemniscus will travel all along the brain stem, medulla, pons, midbrain, and enter in the thalamus. Okay. Thalamus, and from the thalamus there is origin of the third neuron, and it will go to the primary somatosensory cortex. Okay, primary somatosensory cortex. Now, what is the applied aspect? Function we have covered. What is the applied aspect or clinical significance of knowing these dorsal column pathway? See, there will be so many cases. अगर हम अपने मेडिकल कॉलेज की बात करें, क्योंकि पहाड़ी एरिया है, यहाँ पे क्या होता है, जो भी आप जाओगे हॉस्पिटल में देखोगे ऑर्थो वार्ड में, और पैराप्लेजिया वार्ड होता है बड़े बड़े हॉस्पिटल में, जैसे पैराप्लेजिया वार्ड, जिसमें क्या होता है, कोई स्पाइनल कॉर्ड, रीढ़ की हड्डी टूटने के तो केसेस आते हैं, तो उसमें आप जस्ट पेशेंट से पूछ के ही आपको कोई ज़्यादा व्हाट इज न्यूरोलॉजी इज द मोस्ट लाइक द क्लिनिकल, वी कैन से द मोस्ट क्लिनिकल ब्रांच. आजकल क्या हो रहा है, सब डायग्नोस्टिक पर्पसेस आ रहे हैं, कुछ भी होता है जस्ट गेट दिस इन्वेस्टिगेशन डन, और इन्वेस्टिगेशन के बेसिस पे हम डायग्नोसिस बना रहे हैं. बट न्यूरो में क्या होता है, न्यूरोलॉजी में आपको मिनिमल ज़रूरत पड़ेगी. Yes, there is a need of the investigation. There will be need for the MRI and the CT scan to know exactly, but most of the diagnosis it can be made with the help of your clinical knowledge. कि जैसे आपका कोई वो जो आपको मैं बता रहा हूँ कि पैराप्लेजिया वार्ड है, या कोई पहाड़ों से गिर गए हैं, पेड़ से गिर गया है, कहता है कि मेरी रीढ़ की हड्डी में चोट आ गई है, तो उसका आपको पता चल जाता है कि कौन सा पार्ट डैमेज हुआ है उसका स्पाइनल कॉर्ड का और किस लेवल पे हुआ है, बाई जस्ट नोइंग दिस पाथवे से. जैसे इस डायग्राम में दिखा रखा है, लाइक दीज A, B, C, D हैज बीन शोन ओवर. D इज, these are the site of the lesion. loss of the senses. Okay, so say if there is एक पर्सन आता है, दिस इज द लेफ्ट एस्पेक्ट, ओके, दिस इज द लेफ्ट साइड एंड दिस वन इज द राइट साइड. एक बंदा आता है कोई आपको और आप उससे पूछते हो, चेक करते हो उसके, तो उसके ये वाइब्रेशन, टच, प्रोप्रियोसेप्शन ये सारी लॉस्ट है लेफ्ट साइड की. जस्ट इमेजिन द लेफ्ट साइड की है. तो अगर आपका मान लो ये स्पाइनल कॉर्ड है इस लेवल से नीचे की है, तो इसका मतलब लेफ्ट साइड की सिर्फ और सिर्फ ये सेंसेशन लॉस्ट है. तो यू विल गेट टू नो कि उसका स्पाइनल कॉर्ड का ट्रांजैक्शन हुआ है लेफ्ट साइड का हुआ है, इस पर्टिकुलर सेगमेंट से नीचे का हुआ है. डिड यू गेट द पॉइंट? लाइक loss of the above senses. What are the above senses? These they have written: the conscious proprioception, fine touch, vibration, pressure and 2-point discrimination. आप चेक करोगे तो सेंसरी सिस्टम एग्जामिन करोगे. जस्ट इमेजिन कि एक पेशेंट है, वो आपका स्पाइनल कॉर्ड इंजरी के साथ आया है, आपने सब कुछ ये सेंसरी सिस्टम का चेक करके देखा है. उसके अम्बलाइकल पार्ट से नीचे का लेफ्ट साइड में वाइब्रेशन, पोजीशन और ये सारी चीज़ें, प्रोप्रियोसेप्शन, ये लॉस्ट है. What does it mean? It means कि उसके स्पाइनल कॉर्ड में अम्बलाइकल लेवल पे कट हुआ है, और किस साइड का? लेफ्ट साइड है तो लेफ्ट साइड का ही, राइट साइड है तो राइट साइड का ही. क्यों? क्योंकि ये न्यूरॉन है, इन्होंने क्रॉस ओवर नहीं किया अभी तक. दे विल ट्रेवल अलोंग द सेम साइड, तो आपको पता चल जाएगा कि लेफ्ट साइड का है. अब सेकेंडली, अगर आपका सेम वही चीज़ एब्सेंट है और उसको मान लो स्पाइनल कॉर्ड में कोई इंजरी नहीं है और पता चलता है कि उसका ऊपर कहीं गड़बड़ है, ब्रेन स्टेम में और यहाँ है, जैसे सी में ट्रैक में आ गया. अगर यहाँ पे सेकेंड ऑर्डर न्यूरॉन में यहाँ पे है गड़बड़, या थर्ड ऑर्डर न्यूरॉन में थैलेमस और इसके बीच में है, या कॉर्टेक्स में, तीनों में, तो उसका अपोजिट साइड में होगा, क्योंकि सेकेंड ऑर्डर के बाद इन्होंने क्रॉस ओवर कर लिया है. दैट इज द क्लिनिकल सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ नोइंग द डोर्सल कॉलम pathway. Okay, dorsal column. Now one more significance is of the dorsal column pathway before going to spinothalamic tract is Romberg sign. Okay, Romberg sign. What is the Romberg sign? I will write down the name. Romberg. कैपिटल लेटर में लिखा हूँ, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आगे वाला स्मॉल है वो कैपिटल है. ओके ओके, लेट मी चेक इट. ROMBERG, रोमबर्ग साइन. ये क्या होता है? इसमें है 3 सिनारियो लीजिए आप, 3 सिचुएशन. कि फर्स्ट सिचुएशन इज कि आपने एक बंदा आया है, आपको चेक करना है, आपको कुछ डाउट है कि उसको डोर्सल कॉलम पाथवे में गड़बड़ है या कहीं और है, तो आप खुद भी करके देखिए. ये आस्क द पर्सन टू स्टैंड अप एंड विद बोथ द फीट टुगेदर. एक सिनारियो ये है कि आपने उसको बोला, पर्सन को, कि आप खड़े हो जाइए दोनों पाँव पास करके और देखिए कि वो स्ट्रेट खड़ा है सीधा या इधर उधर स्वे हो रहा है. अगर वो सीधा खड़ा है तो इसका मतलब एवरीथिंग इज़ नॉर्मल. नाउ द सेकंड सिनारियो, जस्ट इमेजिन द सेकंड सिनारियो. अब वो खड़ा है और वो स्वे कर रहा है इधर उधर खड़े होते ही. दैट इज़ द सेकंड सिनारियो. द थर्ड सिनारियो इज़ आपने उसको बोला खड़े हो जाइए और अपने दोनों पाँव पास ले आइए. अब तो वो ठीक है, सीधा सही खड़ा है. अब आपने बोला उसको आंख बंद कर लीजिए. आंख बंद करते ही वो इधर उधर डोलने लग गया, स्वे करने लग गया. पहला क्या था कि उसने चाहे आंख खुली है, आपने बोला खड़े हो जाइए, वो खड़ा है, कहीं स्वे नहीं कर रहा है, स्टेबल खड़ा है. फिर आपने बोला कि आंख बंद कर लीजिए, आंख बंद कर ली, फिर भी स्टेबल खड़ा है. इट मीन्स एवरीथिंग इज़ नॉर्मल. दैट इज़ द परफेक्ट. अब बचे 2 सिनारियो. 2 सिनारियो में क्या है, आपने बोला कि आप खड़े हो जाइए दोनों पाँव पास करके, वो खड़ा है और बिल्कुल नॉर्मल है, कहीं स्वे नहीं कर रहा है, सीधा स्ट्रेट खड़ा है. और अब आपने बोला आंख बंद कर लीजिए, तो वो स्वे करने लग गया इधर उधर. ये सेकंड सिनेरियो है. थर्ड वाला है आपने कहा खड़े हो जाइए और खड़े होते ही वो स्वे कर रहा है इधर उधर. तो अब इन दोनों में प्रॉब्लम है. इट इज़ नॉट नॉर्मल. दोनों में से प्रॉब्लम है, दोनों में अलग अलग प्रॉब्लम है. अब कैसे पता चलेगा क्या प्रॉब्लम है? ये सिनेरियो क्या था कि वो खड़ा हुआ, आंखें खुली हुई है, तब तो ठीक है सब कुछ. जैसे ही उसने आंखें बंद करी वो स्वे करने लग गया. इट मीन्स कि उसके डोर्सल कॉलम में दिक्कत है. वो स्वे क्यों कर रहा है? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल स्वे इसलिए कर रहा है कि उसकी पोजीशन सेंस नहीं आ रही है, प्रोप्रियोसेप्शन नहीं आ रही है, ब्रेन तक सिग्नल नहीं पहुंच पा रहे हैं कि पोजीशन क्या है। तो बॉडी अपनी ट्राई कर रही है मेंटेन करने के लिए, ठीक है। जिस साइड होगा लीजन वो उस साइड स्वे कर जाएगा। वो फर्दर डिटेल छोड़िए, आप जस्ट ये देखिए कि आपको पता करना है कि डोर्सल कॉलम अफेक्टेड है या नहीं। तो वो स्वे कर रहा है, इसका मतलब डोर्सल कॉलम अफेक्टेड है। अब आपने उसको बोला कि आप जब उसकी आंख खुली थी तब तो ठीक था, आपने जैसे ही बोला आंख बंद कर लो तब स्वे करने लगा था ना, कि हमने ये कंडीशन ली थी कि वो खड़ा हुआ सही है, आपने बोला आंख बंद कर लो, स्वे करने लग गया। इसका मतलब क्या है? जब आंख खुली थी तब तक तो ठीक था, आंख बंद करते ही वो स्वे करने लग गया। इसका मतलब उसको कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, बट जैसे ही वो आंख खोलता है तो वो प्रॉब्लम को ओवरकम कर लेता है। इट मीन्स देर इज़ वन पाथवे दैट इज़ विजुअल सेरिबेलर ट्रैक, विजुअल रिफ्लेक्स, कि आप खड़े हो और आपका डोर्सल कॉलम अफेक्टेड है, आपने तो आप गिरोगे एक साइड, बट आपकी आंखें खुली है तो वो विजुअल रिफ्लेक्सेस है, विजुअल से सेरिबेलम तक। सेरिबेलम क्या करता है? अपना पोजीशन मेंटेन करता है बॉडी का। तो विजुअल पाथवे जो होगा ये सेरिबेलम को भेज रहा है सिग्नल कि अरे आप बिल्कुल प्लेन एरिया में खड़े हो, कहीं ऊबड़ खाबड़ जगह में नहीं हो, तो आप खड़े रहोगे। और जैसे ही आप आंख बंद करोगे, यू हैव कट ऑफ दैट विजुअल सेंसेशन, तो आप गिरने लग जाओगे। इट मीन्स देयर इज प्रॉब्लम विद द डोर्सल कॉलम। जो थर्ड वाली थी वो सिचुएशन क्या थी? उसने जैसे ही खड़ा किया, आंखें खुली है, तब भी वो स्वे कर रहा है। इसका मतलब कि उसका जो पाथवे है ना आंखों के थ्रू, जो विजुअल वाला सेरिबेलम में जा रहा था, वही डिफेक्टिव है उसका। तो इसलिए सेरिबेलम में लीजन है उसका। अगर इफ द पेशेंट इज एबल टू स्टैंड इन ए स्टेबल पोस्चर with either eyes closed or eyes open, that is normal. The second scenario is the patient is able to stand with the eyes open, but as soon as eyes are closed, he will sway. It means cerebellar tract is intact, but there is problem within the dorsal column. अब अगर वो खड़ा होता है, आंखें खुली है या आंखें बंद है, तो भी स्वे कर रहा है, इसका मतलब सेरिबेलम में प्रॉब्लम है। दैट इज regarding the Romberg sign. Okay, that is regarding the Romberg sign.